Welcome everybody to the 2023 IAAO Membership Madness Tournament. We are so excited to have you here with us today. I want to welcome back any familiar faces who may have been watching these videos in the past, as well as anyone who may be joining us for the first time. If you are new and you're unfamiliar with the tournament, what's really exciting about this is it's a really fun way for us to celebrate a lot of our members who are out there recruiting, bringing in those new names, as well as welcoming the new names that they bring in. So this is built on an idea about encouraging people to refer and encourage other people to join the association. So what we have here is a bracket. It's split up into 4 regions. We have 64 names. We're gonna go region at a time, and each matchup, as you'll see here on the screen with our trusty bracket, is gonna be decided by a coin flip, our trusty coin here, and heads will be that top name and tails will be the bottom name to move on. So really simple, just a fun way to celebrate. So we'll work through, like I mentioned, region by region. And then so once we get down to our last 4 names, we'll do kind of another bracket, if you will, and decide those coin flips. So we started here with region 1. As you can see on the screen, I have my trusty bracket down here to reference as well as we work through, so we can make sure that this is correct. But we're really excited. So if you see your name up there, good luck. If you're here just watching, sit back and enjoy. This will be a lot of fun. Our tournament is going to determine who is the winner of a free IAAO self-study course, as well as an IAAO bundle of swag. Super excited. I got a lot of great stuff to share with you. So if you're here, whoever our winner is, if you're joining us live, we'll be in touch with you. If you catch the recording afterwards, we'll be reaching out, but super excited to get this started. So without further ado, we're gonna start flipping this coin, and hopefully I don't drop it too much, but we'll just go ahead and get started here with our first matchup, and we have Frederick versus Ian. And moving on, our first matchup, the inaugural coin flip is Frederick. Congratulations, Frederick. Next up, we have Denise and Mallory. And moving on, we have Mallory. Next up, we have Guadalupe and Christopher. And moving on, we have Guadalupe. Awesome. Next up, we have Jennifer and Vanessa. And moving on, we have Vanessa. Awesome. Next up, we have Jim versus Whitney. And we have Whitney moving on. Awesome. Next up, we have Joe versus Jennifer. And looks like we have, on my place here, we have Joe. Next up, we have Michael versus Latanya. And moving on there, we have Latanya. And our last matchup in the first round of this region is we have Brooklyn versus Diana. And moving on, we have Brooklyn. Awesome. All right, we're gonna keep moving along here in region 1. Next matchup we have is Frederick versus Mallory. And moving on, we have Mallory. Awesome. Next up, we have Guadalupe versus Vanessa. And moving on is Vanessa. Next up, we have Whitney versus Joe. And looks like we have Joe moving on. Next up, we have Latanya versus Brooklyn. And next up, moving on there, we have Latanya. Awesome. All right, our next matchup is Mallory versus Vanessa. And we have Vanessa. Awesome. And next up, Joe versus Latanya. And moving on is Latanya. So for our, in our final matchup of region 1, we have Vanessa versus Latanya. And winning region 1 is Vanessa. Congratulations, Vanessa. As I mentioned before, if you're just now joining us, we will be moving region by region. We just completed region 1, and we'll move on to region 2 now. All right, as you can see now on the screen, we have region 2 up, and without further ado, we're gonna keep flipping the coin. So our first matchup here in region 2, we have Greg versus Bill. And moving on, we have Bill. Next up, we have Lisa versus Amy. And moving on there, we have Lisa. Next up, we have Megan versus Penny. And moving on, we have Megan. Next, we have Sheila versus Tamana. And moving on, we have Sheila. Next up, we have Karsten versus Gary. And moving on there, we have Gary. Next up, we have Crystal versus Patrick. First drop of the day. Let's do that one again. All right, we are at Crystal versus Patrick. And moving on there, we have Patrick. Next up, we have Elizabeth versus John. And moving on, we have Elizabeth. And final matchup of the first round in Region 2, we have Jason versus Leanna. And we have Leanna moving on there. All right, so back to the top of the bracket here, we have Bill versus Lisa. And moving on there is Bill. Next up, we have Megan versus Sheila. And we have Sheila moving on. Next up is Gary versus Patrick. And moving on there is Patrick. Next up, we have Elizabeth versus Leanna. And moving on, we have Leanna. Next here, we have Bill versus Sheila. And that is Sheila moving on. And then we have Patrick versus Leanna. And there we have, I lost my spot here. We have Patrick moving on, sorry about that. A lot of names on this chart here, so I wanna make sure we say the right one. So for our final matchup in Region 2, we have Sheila versus Patrick. And winning Region 2 is Sheila. Congratulations, Sheila. Again, if you're just now joining us, we'll be going region by region, and now we'll be moving on to Region 3. All right, as you can see now on our screen, we have Region 3. If you're just now joining us, again, what we're gonna be doing is doing each region at a time, get to our last 4, and then put those names up on the board there. So as you can see, we have our next set of names. The eventual winner will be receiving a free IWO self-study course as well as a bundle of IWO swag. So a lot of awesome stuff to give you. We're super excited. So without further ado, we're gonna move right on and start off Region 3. So first up, we have Donald versus Adrian. And we in the first matchup of Region 3, we have Adrian. Next up, we have Joe versus Sarah. And winning that is Sarah. Next up, we have Michelle versus Nathan. And winning that is Michelle. Next up, we have Dina versus Tony. And moving on there is Tony. Next up, we have Christian versus Dale. And there we have Dale. Next up is Melinda versus Crystal. Let's drop number 2. We're gonna try that one again. And moving on there, we have Melinda. Next up, we have Alex versus Patrick. And winning that is Patrick. And next matchup here is Tanner versus Hirofumi. And we have Tanner winning that matchup. So back to the top of the bracket here. As you can see, we're gonna go to Adrian versus Sarah. And winning that is Adrian. Next up, Michelle versus Tony. Drop number 3. I jinxed myself there, but we're gonna make the best of it. So we have Michelle versus Tony. And there we have Michelle. Next up, we have Dale versus Melinda. And Melinda takes that, and then Patrick versus Tanner. And that will be Tanner. All right, moving right along, we have Adrian versus Michelle. And Adrian takes that one, and facing Adrian in the Region 3 final will be either Melinda or Tanner. And moving on there is Melinda. So for the final of Region 3, we have Adrian versus Melinda. And winning Region 3 is Melinda. Congratulations, Melinda. We'll move on now to Region 4 and get things started there. All right, moving right along now to our final region, Region 4. As you'll see now on the screen, we're going to keep working our way through the trusty coin flips. If you're just now joining us, we are in our last region. Once we complete this region, we'll go to the last 4 names and continue the coin flip for the champion. So without further ado, we're going to kick this off with Terrence versus Tanya. And moving on in the first matchup of Region 4, we have Terrence. Next up, we have Axel versus Lynn. And winning that is Lynn. Next up, Steven versus Angela. And we have Angela. Next up, Donna versus Joseph. And moving on there is Joseph. Next up, Laura versus Fallon. And there we have Laura. Next up, Pim versus Diana. And moving on is Diana. Next, Frank versus Steven. And Frank wins that. And Timothy versus Daniel. And we have Daniel winning that matchup. So back to the top of our bracket here, we have Terrence versus Lynn. And moving on there is Terrence, Angela versus Joseph. And moving on is Angela. Next up, Laura versus Diana. And we have Diana, and bottom of the bracket there, we have Frank versus Daniel. And we have Frank. Awesome. Back to the top there of the bracket, we have Terrence versus Angela. And moving on there is Angela, and to face Angela in the final of Region 4, we have Diana or Frank. And that will be Frank. So for our final matchup of Region 4, and a chance for the last 4, we're gonna be Angela versus Frank. And your winner for Region 4 is Angela. Congratulations, Angela. We are very excited. We've made our way through all the regions now, so let's get into our final 4 and do a couple more coin flips to see who wins the grand prize. All right, we are down to our last 4 names for a chance to win the grand prize. And we are very, very excited. So congratulations so far to Vanessa, Sheila, Melinda, and Angela. But as you can see now in the bracket, we just have those couple names left, so don't want to make you wait any longer. Let's figure out who's going to win this tournament. So our first matchup here, we have Vanessa versus Sheila. And winning the first matchup is Sheila. And to face Sheila in the final will be either Melinda or Angela. And moving on there is Melinda. All right, so here we're down to our final 2. We have Sheila versus Melinda for the grand prize. Let's do the coin flip for the champion. And your grand champion is Sheila. Congratulations, Sheila. We're so excited to be able to offer you this grand prize of the IWAO free self-study course, as well as a bundle of IWAO swag. So we'll be in touch to get some details from you so we can get those shared. Hopefully you're here watching right now. If you are, congratulations. If you're catching this later, congratulations as well, but we'll be reaching out to share that. But before we wrap things up, I just really want to say a thank you to everyone on this list. You know, if you're new, if you're one of those new members on this list, welcome. We are so excited to have you here, and we want to give a huge thank you to the people as well who referred you. Some of the names on this list, I saw some names I recognize, so I want to send a huge thank you to those as well who may have been members for a while, or maybe just a couple of years, but you still are encouraged to invite people to join this awesome association. So we could not do that without you. You're huge in motivation to really build this organization, and we really want to thank you for that. We couldn't do any of this without you guys. We appreciate all of your help, and this is just a fun way to show that and share that with you. So happy Monday. So excited for Sheila. Congratulations again, and maybe we'll even send you the quarter. I only dropped it a few times, so I'm pretty proud of that. It's been a successful day for me as well. But again, thank you everyone for joining. Sheila will be in touch to share your grand prize. And thank you everyone for entering the tournament. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your week.